Every ancient civilization that understood time deeply left us the same message. We are only now in the position to read it. You have been feeling two things simultaneously that do not seem like they should go together: a pressure and a dissolution, a sense that everything is breaking apart, and a sense that something is waking up. You are not wrong about either one, and you are not alone. In 2012, the world held its breath. The Mayan calendar was ending. Depending on who you asked, that meant the end of the world, the dawn of a new age, or nothing at all. Nothing catastrophic happened. Most people filed it away as another failed prophecy and moved on. But they were asking the wrong question. The question was never what ends in 2012. The question was, what were they counting? Because the Maya were not primitive people making superstitious guesses about the apocalypse. They were sophisticated astronomers who tracked celestial cycles with extraordinary precision, without telescopes, without computers, without any of the instruments we consider essential to serious astronomy. They knew the length of the solar year to 4 decimal places. They predicted solar eclipses centuries in advance. They mapped the cycles of Venus with less than a 2-minute error across 500 years. These were not people guessing. These were people watching, carefully, across generations, building a picture of time that extended far beyond any single human life. And what they built, the long count calendar, was not a doomsday clock. It was a cycle tracker. The long count measures a cycle of 5,125 years, one complete rotation. When it reached the end of its count in December 2012, it did not stop. It reset. The way an odometer rolls back to 0, the way a clock strikes midnight and begins again. Not an ending, a reset. And here is where it gets interesting. On the other side of the planet, in ancient India, in a tradition that had no contact whatsoever with the Maya, a completely independent civilization was tracking a strikingly similar cycle. They called it the Yuga cycle. Their calendar described a vast arc of rising and falling human consciousness, a cycle approximately 24,000 years long, divided into 4 ages: a golden age at the peak, a dark age at the trough, and a slow return. The dark age is the Kali Yuga. Its duration comes from something concrete. The Saptarshi calendar, an astronomical system used across India since at least the 4th century BCE, built on a 2,700-year cycle. Researcher Bibhu Dev Misra traced that calendar back to its root year, 6,676 BCE. Carry that arithmetic forward, cycle by cycle, transition by transition, and the ascending Kali Yuga we are living through now began around 676 BCE. Add 2,700 years. It ends in 2025. 2 civilizations, separated by an ocean, no known contact, no shared language, no shared religious tradition. One calendar resets in 2012. One cycle ends in 2025. Think about what 12 years means against a cycle of 24,000. It is less than 1/10 of 1%. 2 blindfolded people on opposite sides of the planet, each independently pointing at the same section of sand on a mile-long beach. That is not coincidence. That is 2 independent instruments reading the same underlying reality and arriving at the same conclusion. But it is not just 2. So, what are the other traditions? And more importantly, how do we know any of them are actually tracking something real rather than just telling stories about time? That is the question I asked. And I found an answer. Because several of these traditions did not just describe cycles, they made specific predictions based on them, predictions that were written down, dated, and verifiable, and that were either confirmed or refuted by the events that followed. That is not mythology. That is a track record. Before I show you all the cycles together, I want to show you proof that at least one of them actually works. His name was Andre Barbault, a French astrologer who spent 80 years mapping the relationship between planetary cycles and collective human experience. Specifically, the relationship between Saturn and Neptune, a cycle that repeats every 36 years. Barbault did not just describe this cycle theoretically. He made specific predictions, written down, dated, verifiable, based on it. In 1953, he predicted a serious crisis would strike the Soviet system that year. Stalin died 2 months later. In 1967, he predicted that the period around 1988 to 1989 would produce what he called, and I am quoting directly, the most important astral reunion of the entire 20th century, and that the world will renew itself to give birth to a new society. The Berlin Wall fell in November 1989. He published that in 1967, 22 years before it happened, and in 2011, 9 years before COVID-19, he named a pandemic around 2020 to 2021 as the lowest cyclical index peak of the entire 21st century and identified the specific planetary mechanism that would produce it. That mechanism arrived exactly on schedule in January 2020. This is not astrology as entertainment. This is a man using a documented cyclical framework to make verifiable predictions and being right with a specificity that demands explanation. And Barbault is not the only credentialed astronomer to make this kind of argument. Johannes Kepler discovered that planets move in ellipses. His laws are the ones Newton used to derive universal gravitation. He is one of the founding figures of modern astronomy. In 1603, Kepler observed a rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, immediately followed by a supernova appearing in the same patch of sky. He traced that same conjunction backward through history and found it recurring near two earlier turning points, roughly 800 years apart, the birth of Christianity and the founding of Charlemagne's empire. He published this. It did not damage his scientific reputation. The wall between astronomy and astrology, the one we treat today as ancient and obvious, was built after Kepler, not before him. Now, with that established, let me show you what happens when you overlay all the cycles together. Let us start with the oldest framework we have examined, the Vedic Yuga cycle. 24,000 years, a single slow wave, rising and falling over deep time. Right now, near the bottom of the descent, and the wave is just beginning to turn upward. But the Vedic tradition was not the only one watching. The Mayan long count, 5,125 years per cycle, a faster wave. And notice where it is right now, at the same turning point as the Yuga wave, both turning simultaneously. Two waves, two traditions, one convergence. But we are just getting started. The Saturn-Neptune cycle, the one Barbault spent 80 years tracking, 36 years between conjunctions. The Saturn-Neptune cycle is now at a position it has not occupied in approximately 9,000 years, returned to the absolute zero point of the zodiac on February 20th, 2026. Every prior time this cycle has reached a significant threshold, it has marked a turning point in human history. We are at that threshold now. The Neptune-Pluto cycle, 492 years. The last conjunction came in 1891, the same years that gave us X-rays, radio transmission, the birth of psychoanalysis, and the first cracks in classical physics that led to relativity and quantum mechanics. The deep civilizational rhythm underlying the rise and fall of entire cultural epochs, or the Kali Yuga subcycle, 1,200 years. And here is something that should stop you. The minimum duration of a Saros eclipse series tracked by Babylonian astronomers using a completely different astronomical methodology is also 1,200 years. Two independent traditions, the same fundamental period, and the galactic alignment cycle, approximately 26,000 years. Once every cycle, the December solstice sun crosses the galactic equator, the plane of the Milky Way, near its center. The exact alignment peaked in 1998. The window during which it counts as active runs from roughly 1960 to 2040. We are in its final years. Look at the combined wave. Every cycle we just introduced, Vedic, Mayan, planetary, astronomical, summed together. The interference pattern they create when you overlay them. The deep troughs are where multiple cycles converge simultaneously, where independent traditions, independent astronomical methodologies, independent cycle tracking systems all hit their turning point at the same moment. Those troughs are the reset points, the moments when the clock strikes midnight across multiple timescales at once. There have been several across recorded history. Each one coincided with a major civilizational threshold, the end of an age, the beginning of something new, a catastrophic reset followed by slow rebuilding. And the most recent trough on that combined wave is now, not approximately now, not within a generation, now. Multiple independent cycles, each one tracked by a different ancient tradition using completely different methods, all turning simultaneously in the same narrow window of human history. The window you are living in. Every major convergence point on that timeline corresponds to a threshold in human history, not a gradual transition, a threshold, a moment when the old structures dissolved and something new began to emerge from the wreckage. 45,969 BCE, 2 full Yuga cycles before now, the earliest major convergence we can calculate. What was happening in human history at that moment is largely lost to time, which is itself part of the pattern. The further back you go, the less the record survives. 13,362 BCE, the Younger Dryas catastrophe window, a recurring climate disruption cycle roughly 12,800 years long in its own right, and this is its most severe known occurrence. A comet impact that ended the last ice age abruptly. Global flooding, mass extinction, and immediately afterward, the sudden appearance of Göbekli Tepe in what is now Turkey, the world's oldest known monumental structure, built by survivors who understood enough about the cycle to know a long dark was coming. They did not just build it, they buried it, deliberately. Around 10,000 BCE, they covered it completely, preserved it for whoever came next, as if they were leaving a message across the dark. Someone found it in 1994, 8,239 BCE. 2 Mayan long counts before now, another convergence, another reset, the second largest climate disruption of the entire Holocene period, settlements abandoned across the Near East, the first large-scale human migrations, and immediately after, the first cities. Agriculture spreading globally for the first time. 3,114 BCE. The Mayan long count begins, the Hindu Kali Yuga begins, 12 years apart. 2 civilizations independently identifying the same threshold, the beginning of the long descent into the age of maximum forgetting. 550 BCE. The closest approach of 3 outer planets in pre-modern history, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. The lowest planetary concentration reading before the modern era. Historians call this period the Axial Age. Within the span of a single lifetime, Buddha, Confucius, Pythagoras, and Zarathustra were active, possibly alive at the same time, independently, in civilizations with no contact with one another, founding the spiritual and philosophical traditions that still shape billions of lives today, the deepest planetary convergence in pre-modern history, and the moment human consciousness produced its deepest simultaneous transmission. And now, look at where we sit. We are near the inflection point, the steepest part of the ascending curve, the place of maximum rate of change. This is why everything feels like it is accelerating simultaneously, not because the world is randomly destabilizing, because we are at the inflection point of multiple cycles turning at once. Maximum rate of change. The Barbault cyclic index, the arithmetic sum of outer planetary geometry, bottomed out in 2020 at its deepest modern reading, 520, the lowest point since World War II. It is currently reading 793 and climbing. For context, the mid-century prosperity peak, the post-war flourishing that produced the most stable and abundant period in modern Western history, registered around 950. We are not there yet, but we are climbing toward it, and the trajectory is clear. Here is what I want you to understand about this moment. The cycle does not start at the Golden Age. The Golden Age is the peak, thousands of years away. What we are at is the reset, the clock striking midnight, the moment the descent becomes ascent. That same shape repeats at every convergence point on the timeline, every single one, without exception. The reset is preceded by dissolution. The old structures break down before the new ones form. The established order, political, economic, social, epistemological, was built for the descending phase. It does not fit the ascending frequency, so it breaks apart. That is not a prediction. That is a pattern documented across 50,000 years of convergence points. What you are living through right now, the political chaos, the dissolution of certainties, the sense that nothing works the way it used to, is not evidence that things are getting worse. It is evidence that the turn is real. The turbulence is not the destination, it is the confirmation. When you understand that, when you can hold the chaos inside a framework this large, it does not make the difficulty disappear, but it changes your relationship to it fundamentally. You are not watching the world end. You are watching a new world being born. So what does this mean for you? Not for civilization, not for history, for you, the person watching this at whatever hour you found it. I want to be honest with you about something first. The turn of the cycle does not mean the difficulty is over. The ascending phase of a wave is not the peak of the wave. What we are entering is a long climb. The full return, what the Vedic tradition calls the Satya Yuga, the Golden Age, is thousands of years away. No one alive today will see it complete. But here is what that means for those of us alive at this specific moment. We are at the reset point. The choice is made now, the foundations laid, the frameworks built, the consciousness cultivated, shape everything that follows. Every great cycle that came before had people at its turning point who did not know they were at a turning point. We have something they did not. We can see it coming. That is not a small thing. That is the opportunity of 10,000 years. The people alive right now have the chance to consciously shape what the new world looks like as it forms. But here is what is true right now, in this decade, in this moment. Something in human beings is waking back up. I want to explain what I mean by that. Every ancient tradition that tracked these cycles, the Vedic scholars, the Mayan astronomers, the Babylonian sky watchers, describe the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, as a time of maximum separation, when human consciousness loses its connection to the larger field, when the direct perception of the underlying unity of everything, the thing that the earliest civilizations simply lived in as their normal waking state, becomes inaccessible, replaced by the experience of being a separate self in a mechanical universe. That is the Kali Yuga, maximum amnesia, maximum forgetting. And the ascending cycle is the reversal of that. Not overnight, not dramatically, but the field is strengthening. The signal that was suppressed during the long descent is returning, and the receivers, human beings, whose native capacity is to perceive that field directly, are beginning to come back online. You feel it as a pull toward meaning, toward depth, toward something you cannot fully name but cannot stop sensing. The dissatisfaction with explanations that used to satisfy you, the hunger for something more real than what the mainstream offers. That is not restlessness, that is not anxiety, that is your receiver waking up. The difficulty you are living through right now has two sources. The first is the breaking apart of the old structures. That is real, and it is uncomfortable, and it is not over. The established order, political, economic, social, epistemological, was built for the descending phase. It does not fit the ascending frequency. So it breaks apart. But some of what feels like everything breaking apart is not that. It is something else entirely. It is a signal coming back online after a very long silence. It is the restructuring of the world to support that signal, and it is the restructuring of us to receive that signal. A signal that has been quiet for centuries does not come back online quietly. Both of those things are happening simultaneously, the breaking apart and the waking up. You were right about both. Here is what I want you to take from this video. You are not alone in what you are feeling. The people who sense this shift, who feel the pull towards something deeper, who cannot be satisfied by the old explanations anymore, are not a fringe. They are the leading edge of the ascending signal, the receivers coming back online first. And understanding that changes everything about how you navigate it. Not because understanding makes it easier, but because when you know the wave is turning, when you can place your experience inside a framework this large and this well documented, you stop fighting the current and start learning to read it. The breaking apart is real. Navigate it with clear eyes. The waking up is real. Trust what you are receiving. The new world being born is real. You are not a passive observer of it. You are helping create it. This is what the ancient traditions were counting, not the end of the world, not an arbitrary astronomical event, a threshold, a turning point in a cycle so large it swallows all of recorded history and asks for more. And they left us the message because they understood something we are only now rediscovering, that knowing where you are in the cycle changes how you move through it. In the next video, we go deeper because the cycles tell us where we are. But the traditions that tracked them also left us something more personal, a description of what human consciousness looks like when it is fully online, and a map for finding your way back to it. One world hidden in plain sight.